Tell you what, it still looks like winter out here. And as a matter of fact, 25 degrees today, and we're not expecting to get a whole lot higher out here in Minnesota. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this Monday morning, on this cold Monday morning. And looking back to Friday, a very interesting day once again. We continue to have these extremely interesting days. Just the movements that we have been getting intraday have been absolutely extraordinary. And digesting the debates, that was part of the big storyline last week. Stimulus continues to be the storyline. When and if we're ever going to get one, that's been something that's been dragging now what feels like forever, probably at least the better part of a month or so. So in the pre-market, we were looking at the Dow. We were actually up about 75 points. And by the time we got towards the noon hour, we started to slide. We got ourselves into red. NASDAQ trading about the same way early on, up about 40 points. It slid into the red as well. Actually, the NASDAQ started to come back a little bit better. We started to see, once again, that dislocation that we talk about all the time, particularly in the final 90 minutes or so. You started to see that nice little bit of a stretch that we got out of the NASDAQ to the upside. As a matter of fact, the Dow itself never quite got back up into the green. Matter of fact, it actually closed down just a little bit after recovering decently towards that flat line once again, actually down about 28 points. And the NASDAQ actually not only got into positive, but it actually flipped all the way up. It was up as much as 42 points by the end of the day. What was really powering a lot of these various areas of the NASDAQ? Well, it wasn't old school tech. It certainly wasn't old school Intel, because that name had had some huge pressure on it, about 10 to 11% to the downside. And yet, semiconductors overall were actually trading reasonably well. So a little bit of a disconnect even within certain sectors of some of the names that are the haves and the have-nots, and who's really performing, who's executing properly. Certainly, I brought this up last Friday to Scott and the guys on the halftime report that we're not seeing Intel with their execution. They missed about a quarter ago or so, a major disappointment. And now, once again, the data center being one of those areas that continues to be a disappointment. What wasn't disappointing, healthcare, financials, all trading really, really well on Friday. It looked pretty strong. You had names like United Health and Humana and Cigna and Merck and Pfizer. You also had on the financial side, JP Morgan. You had Capital One. You had regional names as well that were moving to the upside. At least we were starting to see a little bit of strength maybe in the banks. Could we put this together and continue this move to the upside? We'll get into that when we get into today's markets, but I'll give you a hint. No is the answer. It seems to be always that struggle. So Intel, as I mentioned, was struggling, but AMD, Xilinx, NXPI, those kind of names, all semiconductors moving to the upside. So that was strong. We also had the housing area that oftentimes doesn't get talked about enough, but DR Horton, Mohawk. So you're talking about not just housing itself, but a lot of the different pieces that goes into that as well. That AXTA was an unbelievable move to the upside after seeing some of that unusual option activity, kind of a Warren Buffett type name of the past. Toll Brothers, you had Lennar, you had KBH, all really working to the upside. So a lot of strength there. So you had Lulu, we had AMD, we had Xilinx, we had Facebook, we had eBay. We really did have some really solid strength coming in and actually propelling that NASDAQ more to the upside. You had some names that were pulling on, no doubt. Zoom, Micron, Intel, those names. Obviously, Western Dig as well, throw that in there. But a balance there that actually tipped towards the positive side. So that's why we had that nice surge late in terms of the NASDAQ in that last 90 minutes or so, as I talked about. So we had volatility had been moving once again. We've been talking about volatility. We also talk about volume each and every day. Volumes in excess of 28 million contracts once again. So the volumes continue to be there in the derivatives markets, not just on Fridays, but each and every day. As a matter of fact, a pretty nice solid week again last week. So we've got a tough weekend because we're seeing that resurgence of the virus. And we still aren't seeing any kind of a resurgence from stimulus. So we're not seeing progress on stimulus. We've got the virus as a concern. We look around the globe, it gets even that much more concerning. And because of that, markets had some pressure early on, down about 280 points on the Dow. NASDAQ, not as much, but those Dow names, and specifically some of those sectors that do dominate the Dow, specifically I'm looking at the industrials right now, along with financials, definitely under pressure. So early on, down about 3.25. Now, down a little over 400. We were down 4.25, so we've slightly improved a little bit. We're looking at the NASDAQ down 90 plus in the pre-market. It was down about 40, down about 60. Right now, only down about 24. So A significant disconnect there as well because the Dow right now about 1.5%, close to 1.5% to the downside. Meanwhile, the NASDAQ about 1/4% to the downside. So it gives you that balance and that disconnect of what we're seeing and what's really moving within the markets. I mentioned that we're seeing industrials. As a matter of fact, Boeing, Caterpillar, Honeywell, those kind of names. You look at the XLI itself, the industrial index, that's down about 2%. Take a look over at materials, that's down about 2%. So some of the names that have been working, energy up and down and all around, energy early on down a little over 2.5% as oil has slipped a little bit. Financials down close to 2%. And what are some of those names? We talk about JP Morgan all the time getting close towards that $100 level, right? Well, it's at 101. And then I look over at Citi, it's down about 2%. I look at Bank of America down nearly 3%. Goldman Sachs about 2%. Capital One has been on an absolute tear to the upside, but that name today down about 4%. So definitely seeing some pullback in these financials. We talk about that 25 level. We've dipped below that 25 level of the XLF once again. So that's something that certainly does seem to stand out. And we talk about that magnet around that 25 level there and the magnet towards 100 in JP Morgan. Yep, still playing out just like we've talked about. That's why so many times, guys, and it was great to hear Rick Reeder just last week, and he was talking about that and being very complimentary towards what we are doing here at Market Rebellion. And one of those factors is, hey, look, because of the derivatives market, the financials, because of their great balance sheets, but they're just not performing right now. And obviously, we talk about these rates and everything else and all the reasons why they maybe are not performing. But from a fundamental standpoint, they're looking pretty solid. From a growth standpoint, maybe not quite as much, unless you're talking about the trading side of things. But so you see, and Rick Reeder was pointing out, we've also got implied volatilities that are higher. We bring this up. I bring that up almost every single time I'm ever on the show at the halftime, and we talk about financials because as we were talking about, and Rick was backing this up, I mean, Rick BlackRock, we're talking about a pretty big size firm. They got a few trillion in assets, but the reality is we do have those implied volatilities that are higher. That does give us the ability to sell options out of the money that give us a little bit of room to the upside, a little protection to the downside. And we were talking about that just last week. About $2 out of the money each month, every single month. Well, at the end of a year, that would be 24%. Add the 3% that you get from the dividend rate. Suddenly you're looking at a 27% return on something that sat there at $100 where they've got a very solid balance sheet. Just giving you an example, not saying this is a perfect thing, and it does take knowledge and it does take an understanding and shifting around, but that's exactly what we've been talking about for a long time now. Capital One, another great example of that, where that's a stock where I've been buy writing that since I bought it just 2, 3, 4 months ago, whatever it is now. So there are opportunities out there to take advantage of volatility. I didn't really talk about it as much about Friday, but today, 30 volatility. Right now, I'm looking 29.30 right now, so it's up a little over 6.5%. It was up a little bit more earlier on, but still hanging in there. We've improved a little bit. Now we're not off quite 400. We're off about 380, off about 18 on the NASDAQ, and gives you a little bit of a rundown of where we are right now. So what's in the green early on for the NASDAQ? Take a look at Zoom. That's one of those names. AMD, Lulu, Netflix, Amazon. Those names definitely leading. Some of the names that are actually struggling a little bit right now are those names that you would expect when I bring up the idea that the virus itself is concerning once again. Levels are rising. Well, airlines, of course, casinos, names like Wynn under some pressure early on. So a lot of what we are seeing does make some sense. The only two names early on today, first 15, 20 minutes or so of the day. Right now, we're just about 30 minutes into the trading session. Apple and Amgen, the only two in the Dow. 30 stocks, those are the only two that were actually in the green early on. So just to give you a little understanding of the pressure we're seeing on the Dow, far more so than, as I mentioned, on the NASDAQ, which is down right now still 19 points. So we've got some unusual option activity for you today. Astrazeneca. So we talk about healthcare names all the time. Merck and Pfizer, and then of course we get into some of the biotech names as well, and we talk about Amgen and all the different names that are out there, not just because of what they're doing with the virus, but what they're doing in terms of pipelines and how are they doing and what price levels are they trading at and all the rest of that. We talk about the XBI and the IBB, which have been very solid performers for the most part and contributors to the NASDAQ, where it's not just technology names, but it's also semiconductors, also biotechs, also a lot of different other areas. But AstraZeneca is the unusual that we're seeing today. A buyer early on, the November 57 calls, about 3,000, a little bit more than 3,000 of these calls. Call it about $1 is what they were paying. And earnings November 5th. So this does include the earnings season as well. So that's something I think to keep an eye on as well. We like to see what some of those unusuals look like early on. We had an unbelievable week last week. It was just extraordinary. What was not extraordinary, and I apologize, my Golden Gophers just did not come through for us on ABC. We had the game day. We had everything here in Minneapolis. And unfortunately, we looked like we hadn't even practiced. That's how poorly we played. Hopefully, we will see the Golden Gophers look golden once again and look like the 2019 Golden Gophers that were 11-2 and not the team that we saw this past Saturday night. So apologies about that. But they will be back. They will bounce back. And it was a great weekend here in Minnesota for sports. Why? Well, the Vikings were on a bye as well, so we didn't have to watch the Vikings lose once again as well. We've had a really rough time going on here in Minnesota, but there's a lot of different other places out there that are doing extremely well. Fun to see the Buccaneers with a couple of Gophers having a big day yesterday. Tom Brady once again finding Tyler Johnson for another touchdown, Golden Gopher from last year, and Antonio Winfield, whose father played a long time in the NFL as well, had another interception yesterday. So that was fun to see a couple of Gophers performing on Sunday and doing a great job. Folks, it's going to be a long week. It's going to be a great week. We've got all of these different tech names that are coming out this week. Let's take a little quick look-see. So Tuesday, Microsoft. We also got Pfizer and Merck. Big week. Wednesday, we have Visa, we got MasterCard, we got UPS, we got Boeing. We've got some really big names. Get into Thursday. You got Google, Amazon, and Apple. I mean, that's unbelievable, right? The three kings coming out. Exxon, Chevron on Friday. We got a really big week coming up in front of us, and that's going to be really interesting, and I think everybody's looking forward to that. Obviously, we're getting closer and closer to the election as well. Stimulus, I think people are starting to get a little less comfortable about anything happening anytime soon, maybe sometime after the election, but certainly the hopes have been there for a really long time. We just have not seen that come together as well either. But everybody's focused right now, the coronavirus. I'm looking, we did slip a little bit once again, exactly 400 points down right now at 901. The NASDAQ down about 22, and we're looking at the S&P down about 32 points, volatility around 29.5. Gives you a quick update on what's going on. Astrazeneca was the name that I talked about early on in terms of unusual option activity. We're only 31 minutes into the trading session. It's going to be a great day. Focus. By the way, you got to tune in tonight. You absolutely have to. This week, we're talking about earnings week, right? Again, we're also talking about technology. Who better than Gene Munster to join us for the Monday Roundtable? He'll be with us today. It's going to be great. Gene does a great job, and he covers so many different names, has such a unbelievable variety of different areas. As a matter of fact, last time when he was here, one of the names that stuck out for us was Zillow. Now, who knew Gene was even covering a name like Zillow? But he is. He covers a lot more than just Apple, guys. He's going to cover everything for us. It's going to be a great one. Roundtable, you're going to want to tune in. Market Rebellion this afternoon after the close. See you then, folks. Have a great day of trading.